Hey, Paul, how's it going today? Good to have you on the
Hey, how you doing?
podcast. Thanks for joining.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome to the Life Shift Mastery podcast. And really, with this podcast, our goal is to take high performers and experts in their field and kind of gain some insights and learn what we can. So, really, I guess I just kind of want to know and kind of want to start out by hearing a little bit about your background, your story as it relates to business, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah. So I went to Pensacola Christian College and majored in criminal justice. Had little understanding of what it was like to own a business, but soon after my wife and I got married, I met her at PCC as well. We ended up back in Virginia. I was working for a company, a transportation company, and I just assumed I would do that until I found a job, a career uh, based on my background in criminal justice. And while I was waiting out that period of time, I needed to make extra money. So I technically started a sign company, but I really only knew how to put graphics on cars because that's all I had done prior to being a sign guy. And I think my first big job came within 3 or 4 days. It was a car dealership that wanted me to make a sign. And then I realized, wait a minute, if I'm going to be a sign company, I guess I have to learn to make signs. So right away, I started researching how to make signs. And here it is, 24 years later. I'm built multiple sign companies. So I've purchased 6 sign companies over the years, and I've opened 3 locations, and I have expanded it all over the Mid Atlantic. My corporate office is here in Virginia, and we have national accounts all over the country. And from that business, it led me into some other industries. I became UL certified in the sign industry. And then soon after that, I opened a lighting company, and a Christmas light company specifically led me into landscape lighting. And then I also started a design build landscape company, which actually was a company I purchased from another individual after he built it up for 25 years, ran into some problems. I bought it from him and built it back up. So I've been involved in many different companies, and God is blessed. I've been fortunate enough to make it through even when things weren't so good, and felt like I was going to fall apart and lose my mind over trying to run these business successfully. And for a good 10 years, I was barely getting by, but praise the Lord that he pushed me through and allowed me to learn some things that allowed me to get where I am today.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, serial entrepreneur, starting new locations. I know we talked earlier about that. Am I right then in saying you started this sign company just because you needed some money on the side while you were doing that other company? Is that kind of how it all started?
Yeah, so realistically, I didn't even think to myself that this was going to be a long term thing. I did work corrections when I initially got out and of school.
Right.
So when I got out of school, my wife and I were a couple months out before we got married. Obviously, I was just trying to make as much money as I could. So I continued a job I had worked every summer, which was for this transportation company. I ended up getting a job in corrections, and I hated it right away. Like I thought it was a terrible, terrible job. And so right away, I knew it wasn't going to work out. I was working 6 at night till 6 in the morning. My wife was working 6 in the morning till 6 at night. It wasn't going to work out very well for us. So I thought to myself, well, the supplemental money I'll make will be just starting my own company doing car graphics. I used to be a race car driver. So growing up, going through as a teenager from go karts to stock cars, my buddies were all stock car drivers. So I actually thought to myself, I'll start a graphics sign company, and I'll do all the car graphics for my buddies. Well, if you know anything about racing, you would know that race car drivers don't have money, and they're definitely not going to put their money into the graphics on their cars. So they're always looking for sponsorship.
Yeah.
So right away, I realized that wasn't going to lead to a lot of success money wise. And I started reaching out to businesses, and then I realized I didn't even know how to build a sign. So right away, I didn't want to just give up on the idea. I thought, well, if I can make a few bucks on the side, the sign thing might work out. And then a year into it, I realized I'm still doing the sign thing. I'd have given up my full time job just to cater to my clients. And I think it was at the point where I quit my other job, I realized this could be a career.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even anything I really took seriously from the standpoint of this is what I'm going to do the next 20 plus years. It was just like, okay, I can supplement my income now. I can quit my other job until I figure out what I'm going to do. I still was trying to figure it out.
I now I got to ask real quick on a quick aside. I'm assuming, are you a NASCAR fan then, or IndyCar, or is it F1 for you?
I actually am big on NASCAR. Grew up on it. Really, I used to race against Denny Hamlin. If
Okay.
you know anything about NASCAR,
I'm
me
more of a
and Denny
Dodger
grew
fan
up.
personally. That's
So
my
Denny Hamlin, he's a Daytona 500 champion,
okay.
and he owns a race team with Michael Jordan. So a lot of people relate
Yeah,
Denny Hamlin with
I
Michael
just saw
Jordan.
that. I think.
Yep, yep. So that's where he's well known in the racing world. And then I follow Indy. I go to the Indianapolis 500 every year with a guy from church. I enjoy going to that race. It's a spectacle and a race that's worth going to.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's super interesting to me. Okay. Anyways, moving on. So you didn't really know this is what you were going to do for the next 20 plus years. You're just looking for some supplemental income. And I think in today's society, a lot of people have that mindset where, hey, I can't do this full time right now, especially if they have a family and they have different commitments and responsibilities, but they're looking to get that 5 to 9 after their 9 to 5. When it comes to your businesses and having that experience now, what are some of the biggest challenges initially that you faced with the new ventures going on? I mean, I'm sure there's so many, but kind of break it down. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've had to face personally?
Yeah, well, I would assume that a lot of people have this challenge to some degree, right? We all struggle with the mindset of whether we can or can't do something. And a lot of it is because we're conditioned early in our lives without even realizing we're being conditioned even for our future careers. And so the majority of people won't even take the opportunity that is presented to them because they're conditioned to say no, or it sounds too good to be true, or they're conditioned to think I can't do that. And it's not really something consciously you're thinking, you know, well, is this a great opportunity? Should I not turn this down? It's really just an idea of, well, I don't know how to do that. Sounds too good to be true. Therefore, it's not for real. It's not something I'm going to be able to accomplish. So a lot of people do the same thing within business. They start telling themselves they're not capable of doing something. And I use this illustration because I think it tells the story. But first and foremost, my objective in being in business really had to do with providing for my family. And now there is the side of that that requires money to do that. I have to have money to build a house and have the vehicles and the means to get around and to put food on the table. But my real objective was just to provide, not necessarily to make a lot of money. And so at the end of the day, I think a lot of guys have this idea that they have to, by the way, there's nothing wrong with having goals. I think goals are good. I think having increased sales year after year, making more money for yourself and your family is a great thing. But what I think most people miss is the fact that we are naturally survivors, especially as men. Um, we are naturally survivors. So I always ask people. I was just in a room recently of 75 guys who signed up for this event I was at, and I asked them to raise their hand for anyone who felt like this year they could make $1 million and put it in their pocket. At the end of the year, make $1 million, and no one in that room believed they could do it.
Mm.
And I said, okay, do you think one day you could do it? You could make $1 million. And then all of a sudden the hands started going up. And I said, now let's start over. Now, if I told you by the end of the year, you have to make $1 million and put it in your pocket, otherwise you were going to lose your whole family. What would you do? They all raised their hand and started talking amongst themselves and saying, we would figure out a way to make $1 million. And I think so often when we look at money, we sometimes think it's evil or wrong to think of big numbers. So in my arena where I grew up, if you were making $100,000 a year, you were a successful person. You were making good money. And then I got in a room with guys that were making substantially more, good guys that were good husbands, good fathers, and they were making well more than that. And then they were providing to all these other avenues that I believed in. And I thought, how can I think like that? And I realized that my mindset was limiting me to believe I could do more than I could.
Mm.
And so when I overcame some of those barriers, it allowed me to think differently, to set my goals differently, and still without focusing specifically on the money, but for my true purpose. Like what specifically am I here to do? While I'm here on earth, while I'm breathing and I can get up and walk around, what is my purpose? And so when you determine, that you want to provide for your family, we all figure out how to provide for our families. But what if we were to leave a legacy for our kids? And what if they were to inherit the actual attributes? If they were to inherit the foundation, the mindset, if they were to inherit the ingredients to make their lives much easier so they could focus on things that are more important in life, like being a good father, like showing up at church on Wednesday nights, and those are the kind of things that I started focusing more on how to prioritize my time, specifically on the time I was spending with my children. So one of the things that really challenged me, and Peter, if you have questions, don't be afraid to ask. But one of the things that really challenged me was I had been in business for about 10 years, and one of my oldest son came to me and he said, "Dad, are you coming to the Awana program tonight?" And I said, "Son, unfortunately, I'm not. I have some business group I'm going to attend and I can't be there." And he says, "Well, I'm getting an award and I wanted you to see that." And that, I mean, I still get choked up when I think about this because I remember looking into his eyes and he was concerned that I wasn't going to be there. And I was thinking to myself, that's terrible. I can't even be there for this 30-minute, 45-minute event just to see my son accept this award that he worked so hard for. And I remember being at that event and my wife sent me, and when I say the event, I went to the business group. My wife was sending me pictures of my son receiving that award. And he was the only boy who had achieved getting through all the books and won this award. And it was a big deal. It was just him and a girl that were standing there on stage. And, I could see him smiling and looking out into the crowd. And I watched the video and I remember thinking, he probably was searching for me and I wasn't there. And it really challenged me to come home and just reprioritize my life. And I actually, at that moment, even I prayed, "God, take the business away. This isn't what I'm supposed to do. Take it away. Otherwise, show me the way." And I realized I had been running my whole business Paul's way. I'd been running my whole business the world's way. And what I came to realize is, if you had asked me, Peter, if you had said 15 years ago, you said, "Paul, what's the most important things in your life?" I would say God and family. But if you were to ask me to lay out in hours the amount of time I was spending with my family, what I was spending with God, they would have been so minute in detail. It would have been easy for me to give you that amount of time that I was dedicating to those things in a matter of seconds because it was just a few hours a week. And then I heard this statistic and it really stood out to me, is that the average child spends 90% of their hours with you between the ages of birth and 18. And statistically, if that's the case, my son's already halfway through the majority of the time that I'm going to spend with him in life. And so I'm thinking to myself, I've got to reconfigure my life. And this went on for a few years where I was trying to reconsider how to spend more time with my family. And I just became very intentional about it. Like, no matter what, even if I dropped the ball, even if I didn't fulfill my obligations at work, I was going to fulfill my obligation as father. I was going to fill my obligations as a Christian. And so that reorganized everything in my life.
Yeah, that was special to hear. And there's so much to unpack there. And like, thank you for sharing that. Honestly, I think just being vulnerable and being real. I know before we started recording, we were talking about that, how kind of sharing your story, it's kind of giving you this passion for what you do now. So when people, they share just what's typically said, you saying, "Hey, like, my family wasn't a priority to me." It sounded like it was. Of course, everyone's going to rank, God, family, friends, that kind of thing. But when you really look down to it, it wasn't adding up. One of the things I was going to mention about what you said in that room full of 75 individuals, and you're asking if they can make $1 million a year, and you said it's good to have goals. Sometimes people limit themselves with goals. There's a saying, and I love this saying. It's pretty simple. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple. it's you never rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And that's a big thing what we do at Life Shift. I know you have a lot of takes on that as well. But if you don't have the systems, the routines, the priorities, the intentionality in your life lined up, you're never going to rise to those level of goals. Everybody wants to be a millionaire. Everybody wants to have financial freedom. You have to have those right systems in place. And I'm kind of switching over now because what you said really kind of hit home with me when it comes to mindset and those keys. I think that's so important to be intentional with your time. You have to figure out what's the priority in your life. I'm currently not a father. I hope to be one, in the next couple of years or several years. I'm not a father yet, so my priorities look a little different. But for you, that was important to you. And for anybody listening, really, you have to figure out what's important to you. You have to ask yourself why. You were talking about that you didn't know really your why of what was going on in those early years. Am I supposed to do this business? Is it supposed to be full time? I'm missing out on the things that I really care about. And I think so many men today, they're going through that same path, and they're thinking the exact same thing you did. Like, what I really care about, I need to provide for my family. What I really care about is going to my son's award program. And that's what he cares about. I don't really care about this meeting. It's a means to an end. So I
Yeah.
love that. When it comes to mindset, obviously that's key. And I think in today's society, there's such a lack of the right mindset, specifically when it comes to your entrepreneurship and your businesses. Um, did you ever feel like giving up? Like, you specifically in the business realm, not because of your family, but the business, you were just like, I don't know if I can continue on. Maybe I need to go back to what's comfortable. Did you ever have that, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Even in the success I've had the last 10, 15 years, you still have days like that. Quite frankly, I was just talking about this very thing with another Christian friend of mine who's a business owner. And I said, my favorite day of the week is Sunday. It's because nothing this world offers distracts me on Sunday. I get to be around some of the finest people in my life, my family, my friends, people I align with in our faith. And we get to praise and worship and, just to be together in that atmosphere. There's something uplifting about that. And what those days come and go. Just because I figured a lot of things out doesn't mean that I live it perfectly every day. Just like we fell in our faith, right? We struggle, and I struggle as a business owner at times. And one of the things I try to always remind myself of is where I came from. And I think it's easy for fathers, husbands, men in general to not get so overwhelmed that they're going to show it externally, but internally sometimes they absorb too much where it starts showing up. And sometimes I think it's a bad thing that we aren't more external, because people around us, we can fake it for a while. And what I really started doing is opening up to my wife, opening up to friends, people who maybe weren't even in business, but just brothers in Christ, guys that I aligned with on other levels.
That is so key.
And yeah, and just opening up about the frustrations. Maybe it's something that doesn't even relate to them in any way. Maybe it's because they have a government job, they show up, they leave, they don't carry the burden home. But I have employees that didn't show up, and I'm frustrated. And then they want me to just attach their leave to a day that they missed when they didn't even go through the proper channels to ask off. And it's just sometimes just venting and sharing that experience. You know, it's almost, if I'm allowing God to work through them to take those burdens off of me, because sometimes I'll learn such great things through other people, and even my wife, who really had no connection with our business for years. She is involved in our business somewhat today. She's a little bit more involved, and I've made her the owner of some of our companies, so she is somewhat involved. But she is a stay-at-home mother. She has homeschooled all 6 of our children. We still have little ones at home, even though we have 2 in college now. But in all those years that I rejected going to other people, when I would try to be more secretive about it, I held a lot of stress. And honestly, I did give up at times. There was times I gave up, and maybe my wife eventually saw it, because it would come out externally. But just, I think aligning yourself with good Christian men, aligning yourself with a good woman in your life, like a wife, that would be if you're married. And then just praying about it, praying together about it, praying with those men about it are things that have always helped me pull me through those trials.
I I really love that, Paul. I think we preach it pretty heavy over here at Life Shift, but it's one of the biggest passions of my life, even personally. Um, it goes further than accountability. It's just, I think men. It's a very big stereotype, but men bottle things up. They try to tough it out. But it's amazing how much more productive and how much more of a high performer you are when you have someone to talk to. Again, you have your wife, and I think you can agree that she's your best friend. You can go to her for everything. But there's certain things that it helps to talk to another guy who maybe is more relatable or can just understand things, just on a different level than she can.
Absolutely.
And that's so important. And I think there's so many men who are depressed, they're lonely, their mindset is in shambles. It's terrible. They're a chafe in the wind. I was talking with one of my best friends. There's so many men outside of even faith related things. They're just a chafe in the wind. They don't stand for anything. They don't know what they believe in. They have no idea what their why is, what their purpose is. And sometimes that's okay. You're finding that out. I did a podcast a couple weeks ago, and I was talking about, hey, if you don't know what your purpose is, just do the next right thing, and just do what you know to do is right. But I think so many people's mindsets, and that's interesting to hear. Sometimes you did give up. It's just like it's overwhelming. And I guess if I'm hearing that correctly, one of the keys was surrounding yourself with the right kind of people who can encourage you, and you're not going it alone. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's something that I failed at pretty regularly in the past because I was afraid to share too much, and I really didn't have an inner circle. I didn't have those key guys. Even as a young father, I should have put myself in rooms with other fathers, but I was still trying to keep my single, friends who didn't have kids. Who I was keeping them closer to me, and not realizing that they really couldn't add a lot of value to my life moving forward. But it's something that as business owners, I think we need. I was sharing with my pastor recently. I had run some statistics on business owners. Specifically, the one that stood out to me is suicide rate amongst business owners, and even drug use and divorces are very high amongst entrepreneurs. And you have to think that that has a lot to do with they have to detach themselves emotionally so often that they detach themselves emotionally from the common man, the guy that is experiencing similar things. And so they feel like they're the only one going through this. And then they just give up. And then they abandon the marriage. They abandon their kids. And so this is a trial that at some point, I think a lot of business owners go through. And unless they have that alliance with certain people, and maybe a wife and a good Christian wife in the picture, it's going to be difficult. But always, I feel like God could pull anybody through anything. But I feel like that just having those friends and that alignment with those guys is going to be key.
Oh, it's detrimental. You know, the biggest lie, businessmen, employees, the biggest lie people believe is that they're the only person going through something. And it's amazing in our world how relatable and how much we're going through the same things other people are. And the sad part is what you were saying. With a father or something, he's in business, things aren't going right. He leaves his family behind. The sad part is when you try to be the captain of your own ship and you're going through the storms alone and you jump ship. The sad part is when the captain jumps ship, so does the rest of the crew. And you just leave your family in the worst state, your kids, all that kind of thing. But yeah, having the right people in your life, the right accountability is key. Moving forward here, I know you mentioned kind of employees not showing up, kind of a hassle that can be. I'm sure there's good and bad sides of that. I just had a couple questions that I wanted to ask you because I know you're somewhat known for your leadership within your management style and your teams. And one of the things that I kind of wanted to ask about that was when it comes to leading a team, when it comes to managing employees, what are some of your go-tos or some of your musts? maybe qualities you look for in building your team, how you cultivate a strong company mission across the different businesses. Kind of delve into that if you don't mind.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things there, and I'll try to unpack some of it quickly. But I think one of the things I really struggled with early on is I felt like I had to have certain people work for me, regardless of what kind of attitude or what kind of, cancer they brought to the company, because they had a skill set, because they were the only one that specifically knew how to do a certain part of the trade. I just kept them here. And that was really just ignorance on my part. But I felt that over the years I'd met other companies and other business owners who were kind of doing the same thing. I'm like, well, he's successful. He's doing well. He's been in business 30 years and he's got the same type of employee working for him that's disgruntled and mad and upset and always murmuring and talking bad about other employees and the bosses. And that was something I really struggled with. But what I didn't realize until later on was that I was losing key employees, specifically good employees, that I wanted to keep, that I felt like that were there for the right reasons, that were there to help others, and that attracted other people to our company. I was losing those key people all because of one or two people. And so I made it a point, and by the way, in the 20 plus years I've been in business, I've still made this mistake, right? I've kept someone on too long. It still happens occasionally. As a matter of fact, we recently just crossed this road in this type of situation where we had an employee that had been with us a few years and they were doing things that were causing a cancer within our organization, and we just let them go. Flat out, we just let them go. And they had a skill set, they had certain certifications that we really needed, but when it came down to it, we realized it was causing more problems. So one of the things I specifically have sought out to do the last 10 years that really have helped me is to not keep those type of people around, to attract people. I can train anyone to do any business I'm involved in. The industries I'm in are things I can teach people, within a few months how to do. And when I say how to do them, I can teach them to be professionals in those industries. Doesn't mean they're going to be the best. Doesn't mean that every specific part of the business resonates as well with them as maybe others, but I can teach them almost anything within our industry. I can't teach someone how to treat people, other people at 35 years old. If they come in a bad mood and they leave in a bad mood, there's not a lot of training I'm going to be able to do at work that's going to change that. And I came to realize that early on, deal with that or get rid of it altogether. And don't procrastinate on that. That's usually what happens. Is business owners are like, well, I need him right now. He's filling a void, or she specifically does this, and no one else here knows how to do it. And so you keep them, and years have passed, and then you realize you've lost multiple people that were good employees, substantial in many ways, and then you lost them, and it's all because of this one person. And a lot of times you don't figure that out until you lose them, or you let them go, and then everyone comes to you and starts applauding you for finally letting that person go that you should have let go 2 years ago. So that's one of the key things to really building a good culture and having success amongst other employees.
Get the right people.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think another key thing is, and this is something I really evolved in the idea of understanding, because realistically, I grew up probably similar as a lot of business owners. Is I just grew up that you work hard and you do whatever you have to do it well. It doesn't matter who you're working for. You always have a good attitude. You always do things respectfully. And I just grew up thinking that everyone needs to show up. Everyone needs to work hard. Everyone needs to, give 100%. Well, while all that is true, I had to come to realize that not everyone's 100% was the same. And so it was very difficult at times for me to recognize that certain people just didn't have the skill set to do certain things or understand certain things. But it doesn't mean they're a bad employee. They might be, maybe because they have the right attitude, because they do show up on time, because they are respectful. Maybe change the environment for them. Maybe give them a different, task. Maybe give them a different machine or equipment or system that they need to be on in order for it to work for the company. because it doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad employee. And sometimes I gave up too early on people simply because of that. So it was another thing that really helped me in understanding moving people around, shifting people around. Maybe you hired them for this position, but 2 months later you realize they might be fit for this position. And understanding that as an employer early on is good, is a good thing. And so that's another thing that really has helped me over the years.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever read the book. Um, it's one of the best books I've ever read, and it was Excellence Wins by Horst Schultz. He's the founder of Ritz Carlton. I don't know if you're familiar with the book,
Yeah,
but
I
one of
am.
the things he talks about with his employees is, of course, that work ethic and all that entails, but really helping them to understand that they are part of the team, the mission of the team, and how they can perform their role that makes them feel valued. Would you say that's important as well? I know you're talking about getting the right people, but how important is it to you, kind of wrapping this part of it up, that they do feel valued and that the communication is firm and they can do what they need to be successful?
Yeah, 100%. So one of the books I recommend every new business owner read is The Experience Economy by Joseph Pine.
Okay.
And The Experience Economy, a lot of people don't know about that book, but a billionaire friend of mine told me about it. And I've kind of held on to some of those ideas in that book for a long time. And it really helped navigate the idea I had of building a successful company. What I found I was doing for years is I was, and it's kind of funny and embarrassing now, but early on when I started my sign company, the way I figured out how to charge for signs is I called all the other sign companies,
Yeah,
pretending like I was a client,
I'm familiar with
finding out what they were charging, right? And so like it's comical now because now people do that to us all the time, and I haven't done that for over 20 years. But I think back on that, and I realized that early on, I realized I wanted to provide a better product. I wanted to provide a better service. But all along, I'm pricing everything the same as any competitor that was in my area. And but I knew I was delivering a better service. I was actually showing up. I was actually getting permits. I was doing things early on that I knew was setting the bar for the industry, locally speaking. And yet I'm charging the same amount or less even sometimes. And what I came to recognize real early was that people are more concerned about the experience. They're more concerned about what's memorable about the experience they had than they are about the product you delivered. And if you take just Disney World, for example, Disney World has always tried to cater to all ages. And yeah, it's a spectacle when you go there, especially some of the rides are a thrill. But really, the lasting impression has more to do with the memories they try to captivate. And they try to do that different ways, right? Like pictures
Mhm.
or using the characters from movies. And they try to do that through exceptional service. If you've ever done a cruise, people who have done multiple cruises, normally they'll say Disney cruises are some of the best out there. And I think it's because of the experience that you get coming from that. And it's a memorable experience. And it doesn't matter if you're 5 years old or 55 years old or 105 years old, you're probably going to remember that experience. And so, one of the things that I think is very important is that no matter what industry you're in, no matter what your experience level is, try to captivate that memorable experience to the client.
Okay.
So, put yourself in the shoes of a client. What would make this the best experience the client could have?
Mhm.
Even if it's a home service business, just use that as an illustration. How many times have you had a technician come to your home to fix maybe a plumbing issue you have at home?
Right.
Sometimes it's just the guy that's working out of his pickup truck, and he fixed it and you're thankful for that. But 2 or 3 years from now, you can't even remember the guy's name. You can't remember the name of his company. You don't know who he was, who showed up. You just went through the I would say yellow pages, but no one uses yellow pages anymore. But you went through Google reviews and you found a guy that had good reviews. But if you really want to make a great a contact with a customer that remembers you and comes back, make it a memorable experience. And usually by the way you treat people, by the way you set the bar and the way that you communicate with them, the follow up on that communication are the things that leave a lasting effect and make people want to spend more and come back to you time and time again. And so that's kind of the same mentality as the Ritz Carlton is, even though it's a more expensive hotel or experience, people are willing to pay for it. And that's exactly what
That's
Disney
the
and some of these other
experience.
people. Yeah.
Right. Okay. No, there's so much information here, and it's being broken down at such a simple level where anybody can take it, chew on it, meditate on it, and go forward with it. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
As
No
I
problem.
was saying, kind of throughout the whole podcast, here at Life Shift, we help men become the best versions of themselves through systems of structured routines and the right habits, and helping people get that clarity, that energy, that impact, and that why in their life. Obviously, you're a high performer, right? And not just in your business, but in your life as a whole now. Maybe you can share one or two things for you personally, routines or high priority things that help you become the high performer that you are.
I think the biggest thing that I had to do was recognize that I was abusing time.
Okay.
So the average adult, this is not children, this is not teenagers, this is statistics that are world statistics. This isn't even from a Christian perspective, but the average adult spends 2.5 to 3 hours a day being non-productive on their cell phones.
Yeah, I just
Now, non-productive would be like browsing social media. For me, I didn't believe that statistic. I was like, that's not true. But then I realized in the morning I was going to Fox News and I was reading every article about what was happening in our economy right now. And 45 minutes later, it led me to something else. And so what you can do is try not to abuse time, right? Live today like it's your last day.
right,
How can I be the most productive today? What are the most important things in your life? If it really is truly your faith and your family, are you praying today? Are you taking your time to read your devotions? Are you taking time to stop by your church and see how you can get involved? And then what things are going on this evening? Are you going to make sure you're there early to show up for your children's events? Your kid has a soccer game. Are you going to show up halfway through the soccer game? Because I have. And so what I did is I made sure that I organized my day the day before. I
right,
prioritize those things. I call it time blocking. I'm sure there's other names for it, but I specifically, there's things that are priorities, and those are all faith family things.
right,
And also investing in myself, you know, spending time on a podcast, listening to guys that would help fuel me, or gather good information, read a book,
hmm
listen to an audible for 30 minutes. But if it requires me to take away from my dad time or take away from my time with God, then you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get up a half hour earlier.
right,
Whatever I got to do to make those adjustments, I'm going to make those adjustments.
right,
But one thing I'm not going to compromise on is, oh, well, you know what? This is a very important situation. I'm just not going to be able to go to the soccer game. Now, granted, there are emergencies. There are things that happen within any organization that at times you have to make those judgment calls, and you got to do what's right for your business so it survives. But at the end of the day, are you doing that on a daily basis? You probably are, if you aren't making this a priority in the way you time block. So
no, I love that. I don't know if you're familiar. There's a guy. He's a hybrid athlete. Me and my buddy were training right now for an Ironman. It's pretty extensive training.
nice.
We love it, but yeah. There's a guy named Nick Bear. He owns a supplement company, Bear Performance. Cool dude.
Mm-hmm.
But he always says this saying, and it hits so hard for me. I don't know if you can tell, I'm kind of a sayings guy, but it's you can't find time. You have to make time.
Mm-hmm.
You said that perfectly yourself. If you want to have that time with your kids, but you also need to take care of this call, and then you're taking the time to be a blessing and come on the podcast, like you have to make time for that. You have to get up earlier. Checking the Fox News articles, if that's something that you need to do, that's perfectly fine. You're gonna have to get up earlier to do it.
Yep,
So
that's
I
right.
like what you
And
said.
then you need to limit the time of doing it, right?
Yeah,
Because you don't realize that what you thought was 15 minutes actually turned out to be 45. So go ahead and set a timer on it so you can read through the article faster. What I came to realize too, Peter, and I don't know how I have until 6:30, so I'm good
no,
if
yeah,
you're
no,
good.
no, no. Yeah,
One of the things that I recognized early on was my wife would, we would plan a vacation. And of course, 2 weeks before the vacation, I'm starting to feel the pressure of trying to get everything done. And then next thing you know, it's 3 days before the vacation. It's 2 days. And what I came to realize is on that last day, I had more to get done in that day than I had the prior 2 weeks. But everything kind of just got evolved in front of me, and it was like a snowball effect. And now I've got to get it all done. In order for me to enjoy this vacation, I've got to get all this work done. Well, I had to really just prioritize getting certain things done in a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And what I came to realize is I could expedite every one of those things that would take me hours to do. Now I could do them in 30 minutes. And so I try to do that in my life in every thing that I have to do and what I have to accomplish on a daily basis. So when I am even considering the time that I'm going to spend with myself doing things like work or working out or whatever, and although they're good for our family, although they're good for my health, I specifically make sure that I am expediting those things, doing them a little quicker. If my workout plan was for an hour, how can I get it done in 45 minutes? Take less breaks. Don't always walk to the water fountain and fill up my water bottle. Fill it up one time, take smaller drinks. Little things like that, when you implement them, they become habit. And then you will recognize real quickly how you can do it over and over and repeat the process in every way in your life. So if you haven't read Atomic Habits, that's a good book to read to learn how to do some of that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of little things that you can do just to start out and gain 5 or 10 minutes, and you'll recognize you can do that over and over again.
And staying adaptable, another thing we preach here is you can make these systems and these routines, but if it's not working for you, or there is a game that you need to go to, you can adapt these schedules. I write a blog all the time about this kind of thing. A lot of people, like you were talking about, wasting that time or spending a lot of time on certain things. People are busy to be busy. They do have so many pressing things, but if you're going to be a high performer, and I encourage this to anybody who's listening, focus on the tasks that truly move the needle. And maybe that's the night before or the week before of setting, hey, this is what has to be done. There's a ton of methods. I write about a lot of different productivity methods. There's a method that I use. It's just worked the best for me. It's called the MSCW method. Must do, should do, can't do, won't do. The must do's, there's usually 3 of them. I have to get that done today. Those are the priorities. So for you, Paul, it could be, hey, Devos, my family, and then this part of the business. And that's like, hey, that has to get done today. I will not go to sleep. I will not do anything till I get these done. And then the should do is, hey, this needs to be done today. I have 2 weeks to get this done. Hey, this is a priority. And it's pretty explanatory. The can't do is, hey, that's just not going to be able to do it today. I got to meet with that sign guy later. I got to record with Paul on a podcast September 4th instead of the middle of August. I can't do that. And the won't do is specifically when it comes to, I guess, your business, not really mine at the moment, with your employees, hey, I won't do this. I need to delegate this. Or, you know what, we're not going to work with that person. I'm not going to hire that person. I'm not going to go to that event. Those are the won't do's. So I don't know if that'll be of any benefit to you, but the M.
Oh, I love it. I wrote it down. It's great.
It's been a game changer for me because I have that clarity, right? And if I'm going to be a high performer, I have to have the clarity. And that gives me the energy. And then the third one, it all comes together. I made an impact because the things that were important to me, not anybody else, the things that were important to me, I got those done. So I don't know that I like what you said. And that's really what it is, hey, if you're going to be a high performer, you got to get done the things you want to get done.
Yeah. I love that. Another thing I like to remind people is, and my pastor reminds us often of this, you can't change a kid's memories. And so you need to get it right sooner than later. And the fact is, we as fathers, as husbands, as men, we really are built to provide, in our opinion. We're to give our family the sense of security financially and physically and mentally that they need. But the reality is kids are more broken mentally that leads to financial and physical problems later in life because the father isn't around. We see this in broken homes often. And so what I would challenge any person, especially a father, is make that a priority early on how can I make sure this doesn't hurt my child? How can I change my time I spend with my child so I can condition them properly? So financially and physically, those things are easy for them. But if they're mentally challenged, if they start getting conditioned with negative thoughts, they start getting conditioned emotionally in a negative way, let me tell you, it's hard to correct those other two. And so I always think to myself, that's one of the things I I regret it early on in running my business is there are memories my child has of me not being there. There are things he had to figure out on his own. There are things he worried about. Where's dad? He's not home. He left before I got up. I'm going to bed. He's still not home. There was many instances like that. And I just refuse to do that now.
Yeah. When I taught for a year, I had so many students at a crucial age in their life. They came from those broken homes, and statistically, a lot of people are coming from broken homes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true that mindset, that work ethic. There's a saying, I forget who said it, but anyways, there's no such thing as lazy kids, just lazy parents. And I love that saying because it's so true. You see ungrateful kids, that kind of thing. It comes from their parents, and having that dad in their life and that mom in their life, and people who are working on the mindset, like you said, not just the physical things, but the mindset, and giving them those tools. They're going to be game changers when they grow up because they have such an advantage. I believe I have such an advantage in life because of different things my parents instilled in me that someone else, I'm not better than anyone else, but someone else, they didn't have those advantages of like, hey, everything happens for you, not to you. Learn how to cope.
Yeah.
I think one of the most important things you can teach someone is how to cope with things.
Yeah, for sure.
I love that. I love that, Paul. One of the things we always do on the podcast, we've already mentioned a couple of them, but is get a book recommendation for our guest. So what would be the book that, I'm sure there's plenty, like I've said, but what's the book that you would recommend to our audience? And kind of that's Paul Gardner's book.
Yeah. So some of these books I've mentioned, Think and Grow Rich would be another one.
Yep.
Napoleon Hill. I think the thing with Napoleon Hill, and especially if you can understand it from a Christian perspective, is and I'll tell a quick story of what I've gathered from that book, and I read that book often, by the way. Is for years I believed to myself, well, if God wants it to happen, it will happen. I'll pray. And while that might be true, there might be that we're not doing the things that God expects us to do for those things to happen.
100%.
And so what I would specifically suggest to anyone who is considering what their purpose is in life is to take action daily. And even if you don't have clarity on it, pray for discernment and take the action steps necessary to progress in that towards that goal.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna use this illustration because it just happened the other day, and I just shared this story earlier, and I feel like it's just a good story to understand specifically of how powerful prayer is, God's call for us to do things, and really our resolve and taking action, what it can lead to. Now, this might seem kind of like a funny story, but it really tells you my perspective, and it's a takeaway from the Think and Grow Rich mentality. So the Think and Grow Rich mentality is that if you believe it and you see it, it can happen. And in reality, we all think about things in the non-physical before they happen in the physical. Before you get up out of your seat, you actually think about it. Now, sometimes it becomes well, I call myself super conscious, right? So my conscious and unconscious work together in the same. And that's something that people can work on. But most of our conditioning is the conscious mind. And so the decisions we're making daily happen naturally based on our conditioning. And so we usually don't think we're capable of doing things because our parents, and I'm not saying that you had bad parents because they told you this, because my parents, I had an excellent home life growing up. My parents always encouraged me to do great things. But at times my parents would say, you don't need that.
Yeah.
You can't do that. That's impossible. No one can do that. And if you think about success story after success story of people, whether they're an entrepreneur or a superstar athlete, it was because they didn't allow themselves to succumb to that kind of advice. And so recently we were in Pensacola. We were staying in a condo. We were on the 10th floor. And I had been visiting with a friend earlier that morning, and we kind of had a brunch. I was gone for 2.5 hours. My wife called me. I saw that she had called. I got in the car and she said, hey, unfortunately, we lost one of my son Colin's contact. And I said, what happened? She goes, well, he got out of the pool. When he did, it fell into his hand, and the wind was blowing really bad here at the beach, and it just blew away. And now it's over in this rock and sands or whatever. I'm not sure. It just blew that way, but it's somewhere and it's missing. And we've looked for an hour and we can't find it. I said, well, no big deal. Just get the spare contacts or the glasses. And then she informed me that he didn't bring any spare contacts or glasses. And she goes, he's really devastated because we're going to be at the beach and now he's only got one eye. And he goes, this is his worst eye and he's upset about it. And I really, in my mind, I'm thinking there's no hope. They've looked for an hour. It's 100 degrees outside. This contact's gone. It's over with. Yeah. But I just prayed a little prayer. I'm like, Lord, help me find this contact. And even after I finished the prayer to myself, I'm thinking, I'm not even going to waste my time. Yeah. You know, I got out of the car. It was hot. And then I thought about some of the things I've shared with you. I'm like, I really want my son to have a great memory of this situation. And I don't know if I'm going to find that contact or not, but I'm going to go over there and go through the motions as if I'm going to find it. I went over there. I called my son. He's on the 10th floor. He comes out on the deck and he's talking to me on the phone. And he says, Dad, he goes, we already looked for an hour. You're not going to find it. I said, I understand that, son, but can you just tell me where you were standing? He goes, right about 10 feet from where you are. Go to your right. So I moved to the right. And you have to imagine, this is a big pool. This is a huge pool. This is a commercial pool. And then there's probably a 20-foot buffer between me and the landscaped area. Well, I'm just feet away from the pool where he's explaining it to me. He made me turn around. He goes, and it blew toward the beach. So I literally imagined to myself holding that contact. I could feel the wind blowing against my back. And I imagined the direction it would fly. And my son says it's probably on the concrete somewhere. I didn't even bother looking at the concrete. I don't know what it was, but my intuition said, Paul, go over to that landscaped area. That's where I would imagine that thing blowing. I went over there 3 seconds later. I go down, no kidding you, within a few seconds, I went right directly to the contact. I picked it up. It was hard. It had hardened. I took it up. I got solution on it. And we were able to restore the contact. It's in my son's eye now. The reason I share that story, and that isn't supposed to sound like weird or some voodoo stuff. It's just meant to understand something. Is one, there's power in prayer. Yeah. But two, it also takes God working through that prayer to not allow the world to distract us and negatively influence us. Now, if I had not found that contact, at least I took the effort to do it. And I think my son would have been thankful that I at least tried. Yeah. But the reality is, I think God honored that situation of me, even in the 100 degrees, to say, you know what, I'm at least going to trust in God and believe I can find this. Yeah. And I found that contact. So I hope that story makes sense to people who never thought like that.
It does. I think I wrote on this a few months ago. There's a huge difference between gratitude and complacency.
Yep.
And I think that ties really well into it. You can be grateful for all you have, but if you're not working for it and you think everything's just going to land in your lap and it's just going to be pray this, pray that, like you gotta put in, your work, your effort as well.
I actually train on that often, by the way. Exactly those words you use, I use often. And I think one of the biggest problems within any organization is complacency, because you figured it out at some point, you got good at it, and you became complacent, and you didn't realize that you weren't going to continue with the same type of traction moving forward.
Right. Yeah. Hey, Paul, thanks so much for coming on. I think this has been so valuable, so beneficial. I'm excited for people to hear it. Thank you for your time and, all that goes into that.
Anytime.
So, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.